4,6 δισεκατομμύρια χρόνια πριν, ο ήλιος μας έχει διανύσει πολύ δρόμο για να φτάσει στο σήμερα. Μας χάρισε φως και θερμότητα. Μας έδωσε τη δύναμη της φύσης. Δημιούργησε τη ζωή. Ένα τεράστιο επίτευγμα πέραν της ανθρώπινης φαντασίας. Κι όμως, κάποιοι εξακολουθούν να υποτιμούν τη δύναμή του. Αλλά όχι εμείς. 4,6 δισεκατομμύρια χρόνια. Τόσων ετών είναι η πιο προηγμένη τεχνολογία αιχμής. Στη United Group αναπτύσσουμε τα δικά μας αιωλικά και ηλιακά πάρκα για να εξασφαλίσουμε 100% ανανεώσιμες πηγές ηλεκτρικής ενέργειας από το 2027. Η φύση έχει επενδύσει σε εμάς εδώ και αιώνες. Τώρα είναι η στιγμή να επενδύσουμε και εμείς αυτοί. United Group. Με τη δύναμη της φύσης.
Check this out.
It hasn't been such a long time since people first started shopping online, and it was easy to keep up with the clicks. Little by little by little by more, the clicks added up to be more than the stores, and e-tailers worked harder than ever before, because they had to keep up with the clicks. The clicks came from laptops, then tablets and phones, Monday through Sunday, office and home, 24 hours in every zone, and still they kept up with the clicks. Now shoppers ask more from the websites they're on, their language, their currency, their way, or they're gone, so you'd better keep up with the clicks. All of a sudden, there are so many must-dos if you want to keep selling, like delivery there, no there, or there.
And make it tomorrow, first thing.
No time for borders. Gotta stay in control to stay in the flow and continue to grow. But we'll help you. Keep up with the clicks.
Why do we work? Why do we make the sacrifices we make? The late nights, the sinking with coworkers 5 time zones away.
Why? Why?
Why?
¿Por qué hacemos lo que hacemos?
Why? Because we all want our work to mean something. We want it to have impact. And not just on the bottom line, but the people we ultimately serve. Your customers. Iron Mountain knows how to make your work mean more. After all, we've been protecting your most valuable assets for over 7 decades. Who better to help you use it to unlock new ideas and insights that will not only accelerate your business, but elevate it in so many ways. By digitizing your information, securely decommissioning your IT assets, safeguarding your brand reputation, collaborating to meet your sustainability goals, and connecting your work to the world.
So let's roll up our sleeves and get to it, shall we?
Let's find the gold in your mountain of data.
Let's elevate.
Let's elevate.
Let's elevate.
带的无敌的梦。
让我们提升。
Let's elevate.
Let's elevate.
Elevate the power of your work.
4,6 δισεκατομμύρια χρόνια πριν, ο ήλιος μας έχει διανύσει πολύ δρόμο για να φτάσει στο σήμερα. Μας χάρισε φως και θερμότητα. Μας έδωσε τη δύναμη της φύσης. Δημιούργησε τη ζωή, ένα τεράστιο επίτευγμα πέραν της ανθρώπινης φαντασίας. Κι όμως, κάποιοι εξακολουθούν να υποτιμούν τη δύναμη του, αλλά όχι εμείς. 4,6 δισεκατομμύρια χρόνια. Τόσων ετών είναι η πιο προηγμένη τεχνολογία εχμής. Στη United Group αναπτύσσουμε τα δικά μας αιωλικά και ηλιακά πάρκα για να εξασφαλίσουμε 100% ανανεώσιμες πηγές ηλεκτρικής ενέργειας από το 2027. Η φύση έχει επενδύσει σε εμάς εδώ και αιώνες. Τώρα είναι η στιγμή να επενδύσουμε και εμείς αυτή. United Group. Με τη δύναμη της φύσης.
Check this out.
It hasn't been such a long time since people first started shopping online, and it was easy to keep up with the clicks. Little by little by little by more, the clicks added up to be more than the stores, and e-tailers worked harder than ever before because they had to keep up with the clicks. The clicks came from laptops, then tablets and phones, Monday through Sunday, office and home, 24 hours in every zone, and still they kept up with the clicks. Now shoppers ask more from the websites they're on, their language, their currency, their way, or they're gone, so you'd better keep up with the clicks. All of a sudden, there are so many must-dos if you want to keep selling, like delivery there, no there, or there.
And make it tomorrow. First thing.
No time for borders. Got to stay in control, to stay in the flow and continue to grow. But we'll help you. Keep up with the clicks.
Παρακαλώ, θα ήθελα να καθίσετε γιατί πρέπει να ξεκινήσουμε. Λοιπόν, ευχαριστώ σε όσους καθίσατε. Οι υπόλοιποι παρακαλώ θα πρέπει να καθίσετε γιατί ξεκινάμε αμέσως. Λοιπόν, ας ξεκινήσουμε. Καλησπέρα σε όλους. Είμαι ο Τόν Στάντετς και είμαι ο βοηθός αρχισυντάκτη του Economist, αλλά εκ μέρους του Economist και του Economist Impact σας καλωσορίζω στο World Ahead 2025 Gala. Ευχαριστώ που είστε εδώ. Χαίρομαι ιδιαίτερα που βρίσκομαι στην Αθήνα και θα ήθελα να ευχαριστήσω τους sponsors. Τους βλέπετε όλους εδώ. Θα ήθελα όμως να ευχαριστήσω ιδιαίτερα τους τρεις κύριους sponsors. Έχουμε ένα εξαιρετικό πρόγραμμα για σας σήμερα. Έχουμε εξαιρετικούς ομιλητές και θα δούμε τι μέλη γενέστε για το επόμενο έτος. Θα ξεκινήσουμε με τις απόψεις του Economist, κάποιες προβλέψεις του World Ahead. Αυτό είναι το τμήμα μου, γιατί είμαι και ο αρχισυντάκτης του World Ahead. Το World Ahead είναι η ετήσια έκδοσή μας και μέσα από αυτή προσπαθούμε να δούμε τι θα συμβεί το επόμενο έτος. Εδώ βλέπετε τα εξώφυλλα προηγούμενων εκδόσεων, γράφονται από τους ίδιους δημοσιογράφους και συνδράμονται από τους δημοσιογράφους του Economist Intelligence Unit. Όπως στην Ταϊβάν και στη Γαλλία. Το 2025 είναι μια χρονιά προσδοκιών. Μπορούν οι νέοι ηγέτες να τηρήσουν όσα υποσχέθηκαν? Θα αλλάξουν οι ταπεινωμένοι ηγέτες? Αν όχι, οι αναταραχές θα είναι αναπόφευκτες. Και στην περίπτωση του κυρίου Τραμπ, κανείς δεν υποσχέθηκε τόσες αλλαγές όσο αυτός. Παρά τις υποσχέσεις του, δεν τέλειωσε τον πόλεμο στην Ουκρανία σε μία ημέρα. Τι πρόκειται να κάνει? Θα έχει μια συμφωνία με τον Βλαντιμίρ Πούτιν? Αν συμβεί κάτι τέτοιο, το ερώτημα είναι, θα έχουμε διασφαλίσεις προς την Ουκρανία αν υπογράψει μια συνθήκη. Αν η Ρωσία αφαιθεί να έχει το πάνω χέρι σε αυτό, μήπως θα σταλθούν λάθος μηνύματα σε χώρες όπως η Κίνα, το Ιράν και η Βόρεια Κορέα. Ο Τραμπ λέει ότι η προσοχή της Αμερικής έχει διασπαστεί και πρέπει να επικεντρωθεί επιτέλους στην Κίνα. Επίσης, στον Ειρηνικό δεν ξέρουμε αν η Κίνα, αν οι Ηνωμένες Πολιτείες θα αντιταχθούν στην Κίνα. Τι πρόκειται να συμβεί με τις Φιλιππίνες. Ο Ντόναλντ Τραμπ πιστεύει στην αποτροπή.
That could embolden America's foes. The other big question is trade, and we're going to be talking about this a lot, I think, this evening. Donald Trump keeps threatening to impose tariffs on imports to America from friends and foes alike, but does he really mean it? And if so, how far will he go? Will he really impose a 60% tariff on goods from China? As we saw in the recent spat with Colombia just in the last few days, Trump used the threat of tariffs to get something he wanted, to get Colombia to accept military aircraft carrying deported migrants. So this could all just be a negotiating ploy. Let's hope it is, because last time America tried blanket tariffs was in 1930 with the Smoot-Hawley tariffs, and global trade fell by 2/3. So if there were to be these big tariffs, it could affect America's growth and it could affect global growth really quite badly. China, Mexico and Canada would be particularly hard hit as America's closest trading partners. And China is already struggling to meet its 5% growth target. And that brings us to what's happening in clean tech. China's economy is in a mess because its property industry collapsed. So the government's plan is export-led growth, and in particular, booming exports of solar panels, batteries and electric cars to try to offset the weakness of its domestic economy. Now, this is a mixed blessing for the world. On the one hand, many companies and many countries are worried about the impact this will have on them because they can't compete with China's low prices. America, Canada and the EU have imposed tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, for example. And America has been aggressively subsidising its own clean tech industries. On the other hand, cheap Chinese exports are good for the world because they mean that clean tech is available at very low prices, and adoption of solar panels and grid storage has been shooting up and repeatedly outstripping forecasts. Developing countries can buy clean technology at a very low price. There's been a huge expansion of solar in Pakistan, for example. So that's good news. And we may get more good news in 2025 because we may soon find out whether global greenhouse gas emissions have peaked. It all depends on the latest figures from China, which were due just at the end of last month. Some analysts think that China's emissions peaked in 2020 and have been falling since then. And if that's true, then the trajectory of global emissions will also have passed its peak. We don't know whether it will be the case or not, but we should find out soon. And obviously that would be a big milestone on the way to dealing with the climate change problem. And even though Donald Trump is a climate change skeptic, he can't stop the energy transition. Let's stay with economics. Inflation has been the main thing on policymakers' minds for the past few years, but advanced economies must now confront the challenge of reducing their deficits. The G7 countries are on average running a deficit of 6% of GDP, and this is completely unsustainable. America is spending more on servicing its debt than it is on defence, which is saying something because it's the world's biggest spender on defence. Now, we didn't hear much about this in last year's elections because you don't tend to win election by promising to increase taxes and cutting spending. But that's what many governments now potentially have to do unless they can somehow engineer a burst of growth, which also seems pretty unlikely. To make matters worse, many countries also want to increase their defence spending because Donald Trump says he wants NATO countries to boost their spending. And this is going to make budgets even harder to balance. And if this wasn't difficult enough, Donald Trump's trade policies would also reduce growth across the board and threaten to reignite inflation. So, basically, painful economic choices are going to have to be made. Austerity is back on the agenda for many countries, and I'm sure we'll be talking more about this later on as well. Okay, on to the question of the age of political leaders. This has been a subject much discussed in 2024 because Joe Biden was prevailed upon to step aside because he was too old, and then America elected its oldest ever president-elect anyway. So we thought we'd look at the numbers. If you look at the ages of world leaders, they are going up around the world. They're going up even faster in autocratic countries where, of course, rulers try to stay in power until they die, very often. In democracies, though, the average age of leaders is actually going down. So there are now 4 leaders under the age of 45 in democracies. There were none 50 years ago. The big outlier here is America because it's got a very, very old gerontocracy, a very, very old set of lawmakers. And that's just a weird aspect of America's political system. But I think we can expect to hear more discussion of age limits for elected leaders this year. And this is already happening in some parts of the world. Okay, next up is AI, which is very much in the news right now. 2025 is shaking up to be a crunch year for artificial intelligence. Something like $1.5 trillion is going into AI infrastructure, data centers, servers, chips, and so on. And yet, most companies are not using AI yet. You'd expect American firms to be ahead of the pack, but only 5 or 6% of them say they're using AI in their products and services. So something doesn't add up. Where are the customers who are going to pay to use all of this expensive infrastructure? If you ask people in the industry, they say, well, it takes time to, adopt a new technology. You have to change your processes. You have to retrain workers. You have to reorganize your data. So just wait a bit and the revenue will come along soon. But just in the last couple of days, there's been a huge panic about the scale of AI investment and whether it's all been a mistake. DeepSeek, a Chinese startup, has released a set of AI models that are just as good as the best Western models, but were created at a tiny fraction of the cost. And we've seen the share prices of Nvidia and other big AI companies fall as a result. This suggests you don't need thousands and thousands of chips to build a state-of-the-art system. And these Chinese models are also very cheap to run, undercutting the prices of Western firms. So a bit like with the clean technology, this is a mixed blessing. It's bad news if you're Nvidia or OpenAI and you were hoping to charge lots of money for AI-related things. But it's good news for most companies because it means that really good AI is going to be much less expensive than they thought. And that means you can use it in more places. So that brings us back to the question of what's really holding back the adoption of AI. And I think it really is more of a cultural and management challenge than a technological challenge. So the big question for this year is, will we see a significant pickup in adoption of AI? Because if we don't, the slump that we saw yesterday could turn into a crash. Next up, travel. The global travel patterns are being reconfigured as airlines avoid conflict zones or flying over unfriendly countries. If you fly from New York to Delhi, it takes 2 hours longer if you go on an American airline than if you go on an Indian airline, because Indian airlines are willing to fly over Russia. So this is making it harder to get around, and British Airways has just cancelled, I think, its direct flights to Beijing. People are starting to pay attention to this, and the number of conflicts around the world is very concerning for airlines. There's also been a backlash against over-tourism in many parts of Europe. And we've seen Amsterdam, Barcelona, also New York introducing restrictions on short-term rentals. Venice has introduced an entry fee. Pompeii is capping visitors, lots of things like that. So what's going on? Well, basically, tourism has rebounded very quickly after the pandemic, back up to its pre-pandemic level, a little bit higher actually for the first time in 2024, and that has meant year-on-year growth rates of about 50%. And that feels like, and I'm sure you felt that here in Athens, that feels like a lot of people suddenly showing up in your country. But what we think will happen this year is that the growth rate of tourist arrivals will go back to something closer to its pre-pandemic rate of 5 to 10% a year. So the concern about over-tourism, we think, should subside. But all of those restrictions that have been put in place will remain. Finally, 2024 has been a surprising year. We had 2 assassination attempts on Donald Trump. We had exploding walkie-talkies in Lebanon. We had the world's biggest rocket being captured as it came back from space by the world's biggest pair of chopsticks. These are all sort of unbelievable science fiction sounding things. So I think one lesson of 2024 is that unbelievable things seem to be happening more often than we expect. So that suggests that we should pay attention to other implausible but possible things that could happen this year. And I have a list of them in the world ahead that you can check out. But just to give you a couple of examples, could there be a really big solar storm that knocks out satellites and the power grid for a few months and causes trillions of dollars worth of damage? The last time we had a really big solar storm was in 1859, and back then we didn't have any satellites and we didn't have a power grid. But if we had a storm like that today, the damage would be enormous. Another concern I think people are very worried about now is another pandemic, and in particular this new strain of bird flu that is on the rise around the world, but seems to be is infecting the farm animals in America now, and we've had the first human fatality. That's causing a lot of people to worry. But it's not all bad news. We're going to see some fun things, I think, this year as well. We're probably next month going to see the first mobile 4G network on the moon. So think of the roaming charges if you tried to use that. And then we're also potentially going to see new discoveries made with the analysis of carbonized scrolls from Pompeii, using AI to recover ancient texts. So I'm particularly hoping that we see some progress on that front. But I think the broader point is that to see the future more clearly, it can help to anticipate the unlikely. So you can read all about all of these things on our website and in the world ahead, which you have on the tables in front of you. And I wish you the best of luck in navigating the coming year, whatever surprises it may bring. Thank you for listening. Are they ready for us yet? Okay, shall I come on? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to keep going. Okay. Now I hope you were paying attention, because we have a quiz tonight. So I think, can we have the questions up on the screen? Here we go. I'm not going to go through them all, but we've got a whole load of them, and you've got answer sheets on your tables. Some of the answers are things that I said in my remarks just now. So can you remember how many companies are using AI in America, for example? But all of the answers are somewhere in the world ahead. So if you know how to navigate the world ahead, and you know how we organize the articles, you should be able to find them. And there will be a prize for the winning table. So do give us your answers. Do discuss the questions with your colleagues on your table, and we'll collect up the sheets later in the evening and give the results at the end. Are we ready to go? Yes, I will. Yeah, exactly. Okay, I would now like to invite our distinguished speakers for our first discussion to come onto the stage. Are they all ready to go? Okay, our speakers in the first session are Kenneth Rogoff, who is Professor of Economics at Harvard University and former Chief Economist of the International Monetary Fund. Angeliki Frangou, Chairwoman and Chief Executive of Navios Maritime Partners. And Evangelos Marinakis, Chairman and Founder of Capital Maritime and Trading Corporation. I hope they're ready to come onto the stage. Where are they? Oh, I think they're coming now. Right, where is everyone? Where's... Have we got Ken Rogoff? Ah, yes. Hello. Good evening. Hello. Yes, if you could go here.
Hello.
Hello. Right, please welcome our speakers. Okay, so the subject of this session is what 2025 has in store for the world economy and what that means for Europe and what that means for Greece. So, Professor Rogoff, I'd like to start with you, please. I'm going to ask each of our speakers to give us their view on the situation, and then we'll open it up to a discussion. So please go ahead.
Thank you. Just from seated.
Or if you'd like to stand.
Yeah, maybe that would be good. I'll try not to fall off the stage on my way. Thank you very much. It's a incredible pleasure to be here in Athens. I actually first came more than 50 years ago. I came in Greece playing. I was a professional chess player as a youth, and I played in the World Under-21 Chess Championship here. And I also came back in 2010 and other times. And it's great to be in a situation where, Greece is really the leader in growth in Europe and looks to be for a while. So that's just a great feeling. I was asked to just say a few things about, I'm wondering if I'm getting feedback because I'm speaking up here. Okay. Sorry.
No. I just put up with the feedback, but sorry.
Sorry. I was asked what would the global economy look like? And it's a very unusual picture because normally if the US does well, after a little while, the rest of the world does well. Or if the rest of the world's doing well, after a while, the US is doing well. And China may be in its own orbit, but again, it certainly interacts with the whole world. We're in a very divergent world at the moment where the US is exuberant, even with the new Chinese AI. I think overall the US is just exuberant. Business people, corporates are largely just ecstatic about the change and the prospects. Europe is very depressed. I've been going to the World Economic Forum for 25 years. And I've never seen the mood as depressed in Europe, not even during the depths of the European debt crisis. And there's this existential fear in Europe that it's just been going in the wrong direction. Europe's been a good global citizen, for example, everything green. The European Central Bank spends a lot of time on green. But electricity prices are really high. Even Germany's struggling to be competitive in manufacturing. And AI, artificial intelligence, which is very energy intensive, they're not even remotely competitive. It's quite an existential crisis. I don't know what to say about the US. It's just, there's so many things to say about the US. I don't know where to start. Everybody asks, what is Trump going to do? How do I answer that question when, if you could be inside his brain, and I'm not sure that's a healthy place to live, but if you could be inside his brain, I don't think he knows what he's going to do. But my gut feeling is that the economy will do very well this year, but maybe it'll do well the following year. But I think over his 4 years, it's going to be up and then down. And I don't just say, this is not a slur on Donald Trump or a complaint about Donald Trump. It's where the US economy is. It's very overheated. We're having a giant budget deficit. We've also allowed a crazy immigration policy, but increased labor in the short run. And the economy is booming. But if you're growing if you have a 6.7%, almost 7% deficit, and your growth is less than half of that, that's just not very impressive. So we can talk about AI. I am very worried about China. I think China's been very important, especially for Europe, for buying goods from Europe. There are two things going on with China. One is that China is learning to do things cheaper and better across many things in Europe. But another thing is that China is suffering growth malaise, the likes of which it has not seen in 40 years. And a lot of it is rooted in a huge overbuilding of real estate, something I've worked on for years, I've been saying for years. It has come home to roost. It's worse than the United States. It's worse than Iceland. It's worse than Spain and Ireland. And it's going to take a long time. It's not just real estate, but construction. Many of you have probably gone to China. It's so impressive, the roads, the high-speed trains, the buildings. But you know what? If you go to the outer part of China, the smaller cities, which still have 5 million people, it's China, everything looks the same. The buildings are shining, the infrastructure is great, but they have the smell of death in those places. The young people don't want to live there. People are leaving. Their birth rates are falling. They put a tremendous amount of money in, and it's not paying off. And it's going to take a long time to play out. And I could pick other things, but the Chinese say, we're doing okay now. It's over. We're recovering. I don't think you have a situation where you're growing supposedly at 5% and your inflation's negative. That just doesn't happen. I think that's, whatever their numbers are, I just don't believe them. And by the way, if I was a Chinese economist and saying that, you get put in jail now, which is really a sign that something's wrong. I've talked about Europe with facing this existential crisis, lack of leadership, of course, having to confront this defense issue, where this isn't a Trump thing, by the way. If Harris had won, this is an election, by the way. I'm an American. Sometimes you say in a sporting event, such a great competition, it's such a shame both sides didn't win. I feel about this election, it's a shame both sides couldn't lose. I was very unhappy with both choices. But I want to say if Harris had won, I mean, I think Europe would also be on its own. She wanted to cut the defense budget. So there's maybe some promise in this. I actually think that in a few months have a book coming out about the dollar and what happened in the past and what it teaches us about in the future. I actually think this is potentially, something that might help Europe, because that's been the U.S. industrial policy, is having defense is a competitive thing. You're competing with others, the world, and it's really the area where U.S. develops its competitive edge technologies. And let me come back to energy. This is such a difficult problem for Europe. So first of all, I was asked to say something about energy security. And one thing I can say is I was at Davos. I actually almost never listen to Trump speak because I'm a busy man and he takes hours and I can read about it later. But there were social pressures to listen to this one. And he said, I will guarantee Europe's security. I would want to guarantee my own economic security. I mean, he says that, and then later he says, yes, I promise that, but you have to do this, this, and this. It's not a comfortable situation. And I think it's important for Europe to diversify its energy sources and probably rethink some of the, maybe slowing down some of the policies that it's done that's made it so uncompetitive in the world. It's wonderful to be a good citizen, but if nobody follows, it puts you in a very, very difficult situation. Lastly, let me just say something about AI. I had been a professional chess player in my youth. That's what brought me to Greece. I represented the United States in the World Championships once, a long time ago. But because of that, I followed AI my whole life. And I am a believer. I mean, I actually done debates on this with Larry Summers, Paul Krugman, Peter Thiel, who all thought, we're never going to invent anything again. It's all over. Growth is going to be really slow. If you had followed, chess is a sandbox for innovation in AI. It always has been. And if you followed things, you would just see these just innovation after innovation after innovation. And I see that. My concern is that not that we don't have innovation, but that our society is not ready for it. It's going to move so fast. So let me just conclude there. I'm optimistic that growth will be good next year, but I understand the nervousness of our children.
Great. Thank you very much. Now, before we move on, if I could just ask you a quick question about AI. Some people are optimistic this is going to lead to a surge in productivity, and there's absolutely no sign of that so far. It doesn't seem to have had any impact on the labour market either. How optimistic are you that this does turn into a long-term productivity boost? Do you think is that coming?
I'm not sure I want to use the word optimistic because I'm worried about what's coming. I'm confident it's going to lead to big changes. What I worry about is that for the first decades, it's mostly going to be saving labor. And even in China now, jobs are being shed in manufacturing, and I think this is coming to many, many other things. In principle, it'll raise productivity. In principle, it'll make things cheaper. But we live in a world where monopolies are very powerful, so I think the short-term effect is just lots of unemployment. And of course there are benefits. Of course it's going to do something in the long run. But I'm nervous that this is like globalization times 5 or times 10.
You think technological unemployment is a threat? Because we do have shrinking labour forces in many rich countries and very tight labour markets as a result. So might this not be actually quite a good thing?
Yeah, potentially it's a great thing. They'll invent things that'll economize on labor. Unfortunately, we live in a complicated world. Military is the first use of AI, and there it's not a good thing at all. So it's wonderful what they're doing with AI, but there's certainly a dark sides to it that concern me. If I were global ruler, which thank goodness I'm not, I would just put a pause on AI. If in the year 2100 is the big concern of our great-grandchildren that we missed 5 great years of AI, or is the big concern that we screwed it up? To me, if you look at what we did with social media, some of you may have huge social media presence and think it's wonderful. I think it's a bane on human existence, and you can blame it for a lot of our political problems, a lot of mental health problems, and again, AI is social media times 10. Everyone in the States Washington's regretting that we didn't regulate social media, and now Trump is saying, and everyone's saying, don't regulate AI.
Okay, well, I think we're probably, thank you for that, but I think we probably want to stick with economics and trade, and to that end, Angeliki Frangou, I'd like to ask you for your view of what's going on in the world economy, because you can see, I assume, in your line of business, you can see trends perhaps before many of the rest of us can. So what's your perspective?
Shipping is all about, transportation is about global trade, and I think Professor Rogov gave a good point about China. It's about the big regions. China is weak. US, I would say, is growing, but with not a lot of flexibility, because it has its debt is now, its revenue is consumed by the debt service more than defense and the entitled programs, so not a lot of room, and Europe is anemic, not existing. So the world economies, they have some problems, with the exception of US. But in shipping, the real question in 2025 will be how we resolve the geopolitical events that we see. How the Ukrainian war, the Red Sea, the hot war with Israel and Iran, and basically the flashing red topic of tariffs. So big picture, if we see the Ukrainian war, it can be anything from we are going to resolve it with going back to the past, removing sanctions, removing or expanding and extending to secondary countries. We saw in the last days of the Biden administration, he put the Russian Black Fleet into sanctions. What that meant, 100 VLCCs, the largest vessels, about 10% of the global fleet was removed. Just to give you, because I'm an engineer and I like numbers, we are talking about the new building vessels for 2025, there are 5 versus 100, 10% of the fleet. So it's a huge effect. The same we see also in oil. How it's going to be, in Trump 1.0, we saw that he restricted, he had sanctions in Iran, and he restricted oil export by 88% to 350,000 barrels. Today is 1.6 under Biden. So where are we going to go on that? Red Sea, is it really true that the Houthis will open the Suez? I don't know. Iran, the hot war with Iran and this is and Israel. Are we talking? Is it really going to be an easy? First of all, there is not any more proxies. This is direct attacks. Is it going to happen anything? Are we going to have an attack and a retaliation? That's what will mean for the oil trade. Through the Strait of Hormuz, it passes about 30% of the seaborne oil. And finally, I can say, is the tariffs. And here is anyone's guess. We don't know what will be and how they will be implemented. Is it going to be a smaller world? Is it going to be the West versus the East and something in between? Or we will rebalance trade in a more normalized way? I will say that for shipping, shipping is all about efficiency. So in the short term, inefficiency can be good. In the long term, we all know it's very bad. So it's all your guess about how we will end up in this. Resolving the conflicts will be the big events for 2025.
Right. I wanted to ask about specifically, I was talking to somebody in air freight just before Christmas, and he said that they were seeing a lot of requests from customers to move things to America before the inauguration. Did you see a change in global trade patterns as people tried to get ahead of Donald Trump, or is it just more slow moving in your world?
Actually, this is what you say is very interesting, because we were really searching for data. We didn't see a real big move. I mean, that is a very natural thing when you put tariffs. You will expect that there will be a front running, meaning that you will try to buy the product before the prices rise. We haven't seen that. What is very interesting, which I don't know what to make of that, we saw that in November and December this year, China reduced its purchase for corn and wheat by 85% and 95%, and soybean by 20%. To us, this is a question. Are they waiting for a reason, for negotiation? This is the questions we always ask ourselves.
Right, so they can buy more later and say they've bought more. Okay, Evangelos Marinakis, I'd like to hear your take on this. And have you seen the patterns shifting in anticipation of Donald Trump? It sounds as though your customers don't think he's serious about the tariffs. So what do you see?
First of all, in what you asked earlier about their freight, I mean, we saw some movement in the container trade, but nothing significant. It was, the end of the year, and a lot of times we have more activity. I'm a bit more optimistic as far as the tariffs are concerned. I think that Mr. Trump is a businessman. He wants to protect the interest of the United States, but from the other hand, I see that he he will try to find a solution, maybe before the elections, to exaggerate a bit on what we are going to do is needed to get attention. But on the other hand, we saw what he said yesterday about media and what happened there. And he said that we have to be more competitive, we need to lower the cost and be competitive. So I think that maybe at the end of the day, we will see an increase on tariffs, but still there is need for food, there is need for energy, there is need for specific products that they are producing in China at very competitive prices. So I'm fairly optimistic as far as the tariff and the world trade is concerned. On the other hand, as far as Europe is concerned, my concern is the lack of leadership in Europe. And as we were discussing earlier, maybe the exception of Italy that has done well and much better than expected. And of course, when you have this lack of leadership in crucial decisions, that will affect more our economies. And of course, what has happened in the last 2 years plus with the Ukrainian-Russian war, with all these sanctions and what the consumer has paid for energy and increased in prices on various products in supermarket or products that we need for our daily life. This has not helped the European economies. Greece is a bit different because we started from the bottom due to the crisis, so maybe for the next couple of years we still see a growth in our economy, and of course this growth also is related to tourism and to the property around tourist coast. So I'm fairly optimistic for Greece, but not for Europe, because I think that a lot of fundamental mistakes have taken place that have affected the European economy. And of course, as far as Germany is concerned, they were living with this substitute in energy from the Russian gas. And a lot of sectors didn't develop, like new technologies, like their industry that hasn't been up to date. So there, I think that we might face significant problems.
Ken Rogoff, maybe I can come back to you on this. How does Europe get out of this mess? I mean, and to what extent can we learn from how Greece got out of its mess?
Well, let me just first say about tariffs. I'm sorry to tell you, I think they're coming, and coming big. Again, I can't read into the man's mind, but he campaigned on that. Maybe he exaggerated, but it was his biggest campaign promise in a way, and he said it again and again, I think, very hard, and he seems to believe it. And
he believes something very weird about it, though, doesn't it? He thinks China pays the tariffs on Chinese goods, which just isn't true. They're a sales tax on American consumers.
I mean, you said what he believes as opposed to what he says. I don't know what he believes. Of course, it's a tax on U.S. consumers. And I want to say clearly, when the U.S. puts on tariffs, it's worse for the U.S. than anyone else. India and Brazil have very high tariffs on everything. How's that worked out for them?
And it clobbers their exports too.
But look, the fact that it's not logical, he's very insistent upon that, so I'm worried it's going to happen.
So do you talk to people in his circle who are trying to, because occasionally you get the sense that the people around him are saying, look, we know you need to do something with the tariffs, but you can't do these blanket tariffs, do the targeted tariffs you did in your first term, or do something that isn't this sort of, over-the-top version of tariffs. And then he says, no, I want to do the whole thing. I mean, are there people around him trying to steer him towards at least a less damaging tariff policy?
My impression is that in Trump, too, if you want to be in the administration and you say to him, Mr. President, 98% of your policies I just really agree with, but they're just 2%. Can you give me that 2% I don't agree with? you're out.
Yeah.
I just don't see anyone pushing back on this at the moment. I mean, maybe after their launch, there'll be, you know,
so what's
some
the
retreat.
scenario there? So the only way he will learn about what tariffs actually do is if he tries them, and then that risks lower growth, higher inflation, and so on. Do you think that's the world we're heading to, where he only learns by actually trying it?
You're asked, this is someone who, I don't know how he learns, and so I can't answer that question, but I mean, there's going to be a mix of policies. So the deregulation, Biden had increased a lot of regulation, that's pro-growth. I think we're looking at a boom-bust cycle, really. This is someone, he's going to deregulate everything, and that's going to lead to growth, even with the tariffs. I think what's going to happen in the Trump economy is he's taking an economy that he says is terrible, worst economy ever. I mean, it looks pretty good to me in some ways. The immigration was terrible, deficits are too much. But it's an overheated economy, and he's going to overheat it some more. How does that end? It ends with either inflation's going to go way up, or the Fed's going to raise interest rates a lot, and that's going to be they're high already, that's going to be very difficult for the Fed to do. So I see a recession in the second half of his term, and if I want to make a crazy prediction, but I'm going to make it, I think we're going to see price controls in the second half of Trump's term. He's going to see inflation going up. He's an authoritarian.
Hey, Walmart, by law, change the price of that bacon.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's happened before in many places. It doesn't work, but it works for a while, and that's where I think we're going.
Are you worried about the independence of the Fed as well?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the independence of the Fed is not sacrosanct. And again, this is both parties don't like the independence of the Fed. I have many friends who are progressives who work, you know, on what should be the future of central banking, who want it to be the Fed to be the people's bank, making the people's loans. I don't get into that. But, you know, one of the things about Trump is he does things that other people are thinking, but he does them in this very crude way. So absolutely, the Fed isn't independent the way the ECB is. If Congress cooperated, you could get rid of the Fed, bring it back into the Treasury in a week.
Right.
And there are a lot of other things.
So he could order them to not raise interest rates.
He can put pressure on them that makes it difficult. And they may present some language. I mean, Biden did that. That's how this happened, that we got the inflation. Normally, you know, we reappoint the chair of the Fed in the, you know, early summer. He waited till the end of the year. Why? So that he wouldn't raise interest rates. The second Powell got reappointed, he raised interest rates. That's a small example of pressure. So, yeah, I think we'll get some mix of jawboning, pressure, and these authoritarian, out-of-the-box policies that don't work. But we said the same thing about tariffs. We said, don't do tariffs. Economists think you shouldn't do tariffs. And he'll say, they said I shouldn't do tariffs. They're beautiful, whatever they do. They said we shouldn't do price controls. All of these elites, they're wrong. Let's keep the prices low for everybody.
Okay, I'd like to go back to Europe, though, because we're going to have to deal with this in Europe. So potentially these tariffs, maybe retaliatory tariffs, slower growth, harder to balance the budgets, inflationary pressures. What do we do? We have to look at more serious policy reform, right?
Well, we've got the Draghi report, which is really well done. I heard the Draghi report mentioned about 100 times when I was at the World Economic Forum. It's kind of optimistic of how easily you can get there, what it will cost.
What are the big policies that you think should, you know, if you had to pull one lever, what would it be?
Actually, you may not want to hear this, but if I had to pull one lever, I would give the UK a Norway-type trade agreement. The UK is hurting, Europe's hurting. I know the French want to punish them the maximum possible. That would be a very good thing to do.
That would help Europe overall? I thought you were going to say labour market reform or common defence procurement.
You wanted to give me one thing. You know, certainly Europe does have to deal with defence. That's not a recommendation, that's a necessity. But I mean, after that, it's clearly energy policy reform. You have to figure out how to make energy policy competitive. You can't compete in anything if you have energy prices that are 3 and 4 times the rest of the world. And
even higher in Britain, by the way.
And even higher, I'm even higher in Britain, by the way. So, Rachel Reeves, she's the chancellor in the UK. I've actually known her for a very, very long time. It's very sensibly said, let's have less regulations. Now, she's not very popular in the UK right now, as you know, particularly among the elite because of all the taxes she's put on. But, I think that was very sensible. I mean, the old saying we've all heard 100 times, but it bears saying again is the US innovates, China imitates, Europe regulates. And that's just not going to work going forward.
Okay, Angeliki Frangou, I'd like to come back to you on this. Are there regulations, you mentioned regulation as well, and how Europe has sort of maybe gone too far. Are there specific things you would like to see change that would help you and help your customers?
We are a global business, so we are not only in Europe. But as a European, I will say, the last 10 years has not been pleasant. I mean, US is growing at 50%, and we are lagging behind with a growth in Europe over 30%. If you take that, and in shipping, yes, we have regulations have increased in the last 3 years, about 30% more, I would say. And Draghi only mentioned it 65% in his report. I agree that we have a difficult point in Europe, and maybe the only solution will really be the defense. I agree with Professor Rogoff, because if we're going to spend the money, which we have to, from the Trump administration, it will be maybe a wise way to use it on harmonizing and modernizing the defense industry. What will mean is not about tanks and old equipment, it's about AI, robotics, aerial technology.
Right, a lot of this is dual-use technology that would also help.
Yes, and that can create a cluster. What happened exactly to the US? Basically, all the innovation in the US and the NIDVS and all these companies that come out from all this is basically the spending in defense, and I fully agree. And this is the silver lining that we as Europeans, we have to take it and see how we are doing. And I will say one more thing about Europe. I'm an optimist after all. I'm in shipping. We have seen that necessity is the mother of all invention. And I was having a bet with my team that Europe will never sign an agreement with Mercosur because we never have done anything, because it's all about our agricultural policy. And what we saw, all of a sudden, we saw an actual signing of an agreement, which means that Europe will have now, together with Mercosur, 750 million people. We are going to reduce the tariffs by 90% on the products that go there, and there is a great benefit because we need to find somewhere to sell our products. So I think that this is a positive part.
Hooray, no, free trade and an example of tariffs going in the other direction, at least for the time being. What's your take on this and on this question of where we can revive European competitiveness?
What I would add to what Angeliki said is that I think that it makes sense to spend this money in defense. But we can use this. We have seen what is happening with fires, for example, and you saw recently what happened in LA, and of course what has happened in Greece, in Spain. At least when you spend this money, instead of protecting your country from outside, you can protect it inside, and we all needed this because we cannot, let's say, be in 2025 and we see houses burn in the center of a town or things that we could never imagine, and you see people unprotected. That's one thing. And the second thing is that you can spend also this money for security within towns, within the country.
Within Europe.
Of course, within Europe. And the other thing, of course, that concerns us all is that with this immigration, I mean, let's face it, there is areas in the UK there is areas in Belgium, there is areas in France that the European identity has been lost. And this is something that will be a problem that will be increasing, and we will face ourselves, our children, for the years to come. So we need to take radical steps. And of course, is all, you have seen it all these years, all this discussion about work, about immigration, that maybe is popular, but on the other hand, doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense for the real economy, doesn't make sense for the future of our children, doesn't make sense for our daily life. So someone has to be strong, a leader, to say that we stop all this and we need to do things that will be useful for society.
Well, there are lots of
if that's not popular or not, I think that's a matter of time to be popular.
Okay, well, I mean, that's the direction that European politics does seem to be heading in. I wanted to ask both of you just some specific things about shipping. In particular, what is going on with the Red Sea? Is so the Houthis said recently, they made some statement that they were only going to target, I think, ships that were directly affiliated with Israel. But in practice, what's actually going on? Are you able to send things through the Red Sea in a way that you weren't 6 months ago, or is it in effect closed to a lot of traffic?
You know, we like the statement from the Houthis, but basically it's a terrorist group. Yeah. And, you know, if you see the statements, the liner companies, which is the major traffic through the Red Sea, they are not going to, I mean, you have the risk of life and the goods and the vessels. Nobody will pass through at this point.
So you are not sending ships through the Red Sea?
It may happen, but at this point you need to see some certainty on this. There will have to be a clarity, and it has to be passed some time, because also the agreement between Israel and Hamas is very, you know, fresh, very recent. It's just a week. Is it going to be implemented? I mean, at the end of the story, the Houthis also, they have a system which they collect from whoever they like, about $2 billion. We saw it in The Economist. You know, companies that are in New York Stock Exchange, you cannot get involved in this. So right. Things that make sense if we see safety, and this is confirmed from our insurance providers and everything, of course you will go through.
Okay. Is that aligned with your experience?
I think that when they are terrorists, and you cannot have agreement with terrorists.
Right.
So I think that for everybody's interest, we need to avoid trading our vessels via Red Sea, and not to take unnecessary risk, and also all these insurance risk. I think that if ship owners be strong enough to insist of avoiding the passage, I think that it's up to us to make it happen. And for them, if they see that there is no target to hit, I think that this can stop sooner than later. But if there is a normal traffic and they can have easy targets, then they achieve what they want.
Yeah, it's hard to see how this one ends. Ken Rogoff, I'd like to come back to you and ask you about a completely different part of the world, which is Argentina. We had Javier Milei writing in the World Ahead about his rather radical economic reforms. They are quite striking, and it's a bit of a handbrake turn for an economy. I wondered what you thought of them, and I wondered whether, given sort of, you know, France can't even raise the pension age slightly, you know, what it would take to get sort of really radical changes to take place in Europe.
Well, you know, we've seen this sort of radical reform a couple times. In Poland, we saw shock therapy, and Poland went through a lot, but it's now one of the best performing economies in Europe.
And it's Poland's the only economy not to go into recession in the global financial crisis.
It's a huge, huge success story. Then again, we saw shock therapy in Russia, and we got Putin. And so it's very risky. I will say that so far, he has surprised the skeptics. I can't reveal exactly where I had this conversation, but let's say among global financial leaders.
Where could it be?
Actually wasn't there.
It wasn't Davos.
It wasn't there, but recently. And just people are stunned. It's working. I even heard people who you would think hate him say, I love him. You know, it's been infectious. Population likes him. He's popular. But it's been so hard in Argentina because the left is so destructive in Argentina, and you go back and forth between the left and the right. But, you know, fingers crossed. Europe is not going to do what Argentina did. Europe moves by necessity, as everyone has said.
Well, so Christine Lagarde was quite optimistic last week that the crisis that Europe now faces is the kind of thing that will make it move. Do you think that's realistic?
Well, definitely on defense. I mean, if it doesn't move on defense,
then
we're going to be studying Russian. You know, I mean, there's clearly going to have to move on defense, and that could lead to quite a defense is a big amount of spending, and we don't want to miss the word harmonize that Angelica said a few times. Because the problem in Europe actually isn't just that it doesn't spend enough. It's that, you know, the Italians want to have their battalion and the French want to have theirs.
It's like having 28 Pentagons.
It's like 28 Pentagons. It's incredibly inefficient, especially in a world where, you know, you have these very big expense projects. So it could bring Europe together. You never know. That's clearly where the optimism is. But
sorry, did you want to come in?
Yes, I'll say one thing on the harmonizing. Think about that. Russia in 3 months makes all the ammunition that Europe, the entire European Union, does in a year. So harmonizing is the low-hanging fruit, and I agree totally with you that the big prize that we can get is when we really move to modernizing. That can be something that has happened in the US, where technology, robotics, AI can move to other industries. It has happened in Israel. It will be a mistake to lose that opportunity. This is the only silver lining I can see on this.
Well, that seems to be the formula. There's quite remarkable agreement, I think, that the best path forward for Europe would be because the EU is already bending the rules on defence spending, right, by calling it stability funding, I believe, or cohesive, I don't know, there's some pot of money that they can unlock. And then if you had common defence procurement, and then if you got the Germans to change the rules on the debt brake, then you can see a way where a lot more money could go into this. And in Europe, one of the most striking stats in the Draghi report, although some of my colleagues say it's a bit higher, a bit too high, is 78% of EU defence spending happens outside the EU. Apparently it's closer to 60, but it's still an enormous, a more enormous chunk.
So you can go across a lot of areas in Europe where the same problem exists. Europe likes to have a hub and spoke system. The countries are the spoke. The hub is very tiny. It's the European Commission. There's some areas like the ECB, it's big. And the outer parts, the countries, don't want to give up power. So, for example, in pharmaceuticals, this is in the Draghi report, but I've heard it for years, you have to get everything approved at the national level, then at the EU level. In the banking system, you supposedly have a banking union in Europe, but you get really regulated by the national banks. Then you get regulated by the ECB. They don't want to let go of power. Germany actually, the German central bank, after the euro was formed, kept all its currency supply. They had all the Deutschmark in case they wanted to change their mind and pull out. So they're just areas, and none more so than defense, where you have to let go of this, and it hasn't happened.
I heard someone was saying a similar thing to me in Davos last week. I think it was the head of an energy company saying, you know, you just have to go through all of the same regulatory moves in every single country. The problem is, the answer to that is closer integration, more Europe, more power going to Brussels. Is that really going to happen under these circumstances? Can you really see people saying, actually, yes, we're going to let the centre call the shots? That's a very hard scenario to take seriously, isn't it?
On some things, but maybe defense is just the thing where otherwise it's just a joke. And so that could be where it's different.
Because maybe it can be financed centrally. That
Right.
can be a solution to
So
that.
if you finance it centrally, then you decide it centrally. Okay, well, okay. Let's hope you're right, and I hope that if you're here again next year and we're having the World Ahead 2026, that we've seen some significant movement on this, because that sounds like the kind of the plausible path forward based on what you've all said. Thank you very much indeed to our panellists. Please join me in thanking Ken Rogoff, Angeliki Frangou and Evangelos Marinakis. And we're going to go on with the first course, and after we've had the first course, the Minister of Economy and Finance, Kostis Hatzidakis, is going to join us and give us his thoughts on the Greek economy. So that's coming up shortly. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, everyone. Minister Hatzidakis has arrived, so we are moving on with the next stage of the programme. Could I ask you to take your seats, please? For the next session, we are going to be hearing from Minister Hatzidakis and also from George Taniskidis, the chairman of Optima Bank, about the outlook for the Greek economy. So we will have the government perspective and we will have the finance industry perspective. So we're going to hear remarks from each of them and then we will have a discussion. So I would like to welcome Kostis Hatzidakis, Minister of Economy and Finance for the government of Greece, to give us his view of the situation. Minister Hatzidakis.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is the second year that I have the honor to address you all in the economy Gala as a Minister of Economy and Finance. As I was revising my last year's speech in view of this year's event, the first thing I saw is that Greece continues to be one of the few sources of good news in a turbulent environment. With regard to financial performance and political stability. And in the economists list, we might be found in the third ranked after 2 or 3 continuous times being first. But it's still positive because it proves that our success is not a firework. Another comment is that we implemented all of our commitments I announced last year. And of course, you can read my speech of last year's to see that we have fulfilled all our commitments. In fiscal policy, we exceeded the goals as the primary surplus for 2024 is expected to reach 3%, something that means that our budget for 2024 will be balanced in a way, or with zero deficit. In other words, in the taxation field, we implemented without delays our tax reform. We have passed through the Parliament with 11 initiatives. As a result, in 2024, we have 2 billion euros additional revenues because of tackling tax evasion, without having a historical previous experience within the Greek history. In fiscal sector, we concluded with the privatization of banks and took initiative to reduce red loans and decrease the high charges of banks. Privatizations continued fast. We have reached 13 privatizations since June 2023. We increased public investments 1 year more. In 2024, they were about 13.1 billion euros, twice as much as the similar amount of 2019. We proceeded with reforms to boost innovation We introduce digital reforms in the state to alleviate the extra charges for citizens. We introduced new incentives for bank merging and a lot of incentives to enhance innovation. The dividend of growth was disseminated throughout the economy, increasing the pensions, the birth benefits, and additionally, we voted for 2 additional budgets to promote social cohesion and growth. These were back in 2024. Looking at the future, the first thing I want to say is that we will be fiscally responsible, which is the cornerstone of our policy, fiscal prudence. The second thing I want to underline is that from the moment we have managed to stabilize our macroeconomic figures, our focus now is on macroeconomic parameters. We pass, as economists say, more and more from macro to micro, attracting investments above all, encouraging exports, assuring conditions of fair competition in the market, and promotion of competitiveness of the market investments. With regard to investments, a lot of steps have been taken forward to fill in the investment gap. In the last 5 years, we had an investment of an increase of investment of 64%. Making us first in the EU with regard to increase of investments as a percentage of GDP. Investments will be in 2025 17% from 11% in 2019, a difference with the EU average, which is 20.8, which will be limited from 10 to 3.3 percentage units. With regard to direct foreign investment, in 11 months of 2024, they increased to 4.8 billion, increased by 8.8% compared to 2023. But still, we have an investment gap in the country. That is why our priority is to enhance investments. That said, the goal is to improve business environment in Greece. We have local and special urban plans from the Ministry of Environment. The Digital Governance Ministry finishes all the pending issues with regard to the national canister. New digital tools are introduced. The new development law will promote tax incentives. A second priority is access of businesses to finance. In this framework, we will give emphasis to enhance competition within the banking system through the 5th pillar of the banking system and loans from non-banking institutions. We will also enhance the stock exchange operation, and I have already presented that to the ministers, and we will soon be given to the audience. Exports. First of all, I would like to underline that today exports for the Greek reality are at record level. To give you the figures, the data for 2024 show that they will exceed 100 billion, 44% of our GDP. In other words, In relation to before crisis levels, we have twice as many exports as a percentage of the GDP and in figures. But there is something we cannot ignore with the payment balance. The increase of exports is our main goal. We want to penetrate in very promising markets like China and India, and at the same time we will use financial tools, targeted ones, for export companies and companies that participate in fairs. A few days ago we announced the extroversion program of SMEs of 200 million euros. The framework of the roadmap for exports, we proceed with the digitization and simplification of the customs procedures, and we try to strengthen sectors that are favorable to exports. Competition. With regard to competition, we have taken steps forward, something we can see in our performance in PMR index of OECD. The government has decided to intervene in cases the market does not operate effectively, and we see some unfair competition. For example, in banks, we have decreased the contributions charged for the citizens. Similar interventions took place in private insurance companies to prevent them from irrationally increase the
εναπομείναντες φραγμούς εισόδου στην αγορά που δυσχεραίνουν
the fees of the insured. Competitiveness. Our priority is to decrease non-salary cost of businesses. That's why we have decreased social contribution by 1 unit, and in 2027 we will have a 0. Units decrease, and we will give extra incentives for mergers and innovation. NSRF will invest in innovation, the decrease of energy costs via investments in new electricity networks, grids, enhancement of skills of manpower, giving emphasis on accreditation of skills and in business training. Taxation directly linked to competitiveness is the decrease of taxes, and at the same time trying to combat tax evasion. We have decreased more than 25 taxes, and the surpluses for 2024 and 2025 pave the way for extra tax incentives and alleviations for the future. Social policy. The goal is to increase available revenues for citizens based on a solid policy with incentives to increase wages and increase the expenditure on health, an increase of certain billions. We want to improve health, and with social infrastructure enhancement throughout the country, we take advantage of RRF and SRF, and by rationalizing social benefits, we try to help those in need. In an uncertain environment, Greek economy has taken positive steps forward. The wounds of the 10-year crisis are now healing, and our goal for 2025 and the years to come is to maintain what we have achieved until now and continue our efforts to make our economy better, taking into consideration always our vulnerable co-citizens. With a development policy and prudence, we will create a more solid economy and a fairer society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. I would now like to ask George Tanaskidis of Optima Bank to come and give us his perspective. Over to you.
Good evening, everyone. I remember some 40 years ago, I was a student at the University of Pennsylvania Law School, and I went out to have some Chinese fast food. There was a fortune cookie. I opened it, and there was a note inside, saying, writing actually, "You live in interesting times." That was inside the fortune cookie. So I want to say to Professor Rogov that I don't know if the coming 2 years will be the years of growth, and then we're going to have a couple of years of recession. What is for certain is that we will certainly live in interesting times. So, our country, Greece. This is for the ones whining all the time. Our country is doing really well, exceptionally well. Our growth rates are faster than the ones of the EU since 2022. This is the case this year, and this is what it is expected in the year to come. But allow me to say that we are still trailing back. We see that in 2008, our GDP was 237 billion euros. The real GDP, in real GDP terms. We dropped, because this is the worst year ever, 2013, 173 billion euros. Today we are at 206, 210 billion euros, so we still have to struggle in order to get back to the pre-crisis levels. In the meantime, sadly, there have been 20 years that have elapsed. We also see on this slide that our primary fiscal result, deficit or surplus. In this period, we didn't have our stuff in order. We used to spend much more compared to what we earned. This is 2015, when the bailout agreements took effect, which led to a surplus which was not healthy, however. It was the outcome of excessive taxation. And this is the only period in which we have a healthy surplus, because now, currently, our economy is on the right track. I was asked to say a few things about green transition. Indeed, as we see, in 2030, EU aims at having a 55% drop in CO2 reduction, and the aim is to reach the net zero point in 2050. The same applies for Greece, roughly. It is quite telling that for the purposes of green transition, the European Union has earmarked some 15 trillion euros to be spent in investments. In our case, Greece, 436 billion euros of energy investments, which is double, more than double our country's GDP. Is there something more important than our environment? The fact that currently we spend 7 billion euros for oil and 3 billion euros for gas annually. So, yes, this green transition, this drop of the CO2 emissions is a great aspiration, because many talk about the real estate. Actually, in my table before, one asked me, "Are we doing great? Should I sell my stocks, my shares?" So allow me to tell you that although we moved quite fast, you see that from 2008, the difference, the delta between the 2008 prices and the current prices, there's a delta of 9%. We have some 232,000 Airbnb properties. Servicers and banks currently have a huge property stock. And we have some 600,000 properties which are out of market. They remain closed. Allow me to say that the government has taken amazing steps forward. We have the new program entitled Spiti Mou, My House, or the fact that as of 2026, the property stock out of market will mean a double property tax. The fact that downtown Athens, Airbnb properties will be prohibited for 1 year. So these steps, these measures are very important, so that a property becomes something alive again, something living. And this will help us drop prices by encouraging supply. Allow me to tell you something more, which I will also discuss later on. Let me tell you that currently mortgage loans have a maturity of 15 years and a 4.3 fixed interest rate, while the ECB rate is approximately 4%. I heard no one saying that, oh, these interest rates are really low, they're cheap. Now, the funds absorbed by the RRF has reached amazing rates because in our case we have 36 billion euros available and we have already dispersed 18.21 billion euros. So if you take a deep dive, you will see that compared to the EU average, the EU member states are easier to disperse, to have the grants dispersed. In our case, we have had more loans dispersed because grants are easy to use. And we will do that. And I believe that we have done amazingly well in this regard. This is a slide about the political, social, and financial history of modern Greece from 2008 onwards. This slide is I'm very keen to this slide because it is quite telling of the things we've been through. Check this out. Early in this period, things were great. People would lend money. In blue, we have our deposits, and in yellow or in orange, it's the loans. And suddenly, April 2010, actually, for some reason, I remember it was April 23rd. The Prime Minister went to the so-called Red Castle of the Megisti Island and told us that this is it, guys, that's all. And given that money is something, money flies to quality, as we say, everything went to quality places like Singapore, UK, Switzerland, etc. At the same time, we couldn't decrease the loans. And we reached this point of a huge gap. We have the elections of June 2012, the government changes, and there is a small wind of optimism, and loans started going down. Why? Because banks wouldn't loan a single euro. Because some people started paying. Some. In 2015, half of the loans were not serviced. 48% of all loans were red. In July 2014, we have the European elections. And once more, we have this bank run. 2015, new elections. This is it. And right after the elections, after 6 months, we go from 148 to 121 billion euros of deposits, and the gap reaches 85 billion euros. It's a vast one. And capital controls was a mandatory solution. As a result of that, the bank run stopped. We still have a downward spiral of loans. Banks are getting rid of the loans, giving the loans to some funds, and we reach the 2019 elections. Things take a sharp turn, and now we have this balance point between loans and deposits start growing. And currently, we have a surplus of deposits, some 75 billion euros of surplus. And we are moving on at a great pace. And now let's talk about 3 myths. 3. Myth number 1, or maybe you can call them truths if you like. The first myth is the following. Banks wouldn't give us a loan with a good interest rate. So why is this the case? You have so many deposits, you have so much cash in your coffins. So, we give a loan to earn what? Second myth, commissions. Banks in Greece, according to this myth, charge excessively. But if you check the EU average is 28% of their income come from commissions. In Greece, it is 18%. Apart from that, in Greece we have 30 million tourists who take the ATM, the machines, where you can take some money out, and they withdraw some money, and we take commissions out of that, because we are a country in which we use a lot of cash. And last myth, nobody is talking about that. Nobody says that in Greece, because of competition, there is no breathing commission, as we call it. What does this mean? When you open a bank account, there's a commission charge. In the case of Deutsche Bank, there is a charge of 6.9 euros up to 13 euros for keeping a bank account open. Of course, they have huge commissions there. Third myth. Some people support or believe that the banks do not inject the real economy with money. On the contrary, I believe and I advocate that banks do everything they can because they have such a surplus of money and they want to give these loans to the real economy. Let me tell you something else. Contrary to justice, I do not support that the banking system should be blind. So, it is up to each and everyone if he or she will decide to declare his or her true income in his financial statements. I'm not saying it's the right, I'm saying it's their choice. I'm not committed to punish these people. I'd love to, but that's not my mission. But my mission is the following: to give the money of the people having deposits in my bank in the right way. And if I am to try and foresee things, then I will do poorly. So, you want to get a loan? Then we have to have a clear picture and reliable picture of our company. Otherwise, you cannot get a loan. And let me tell you a couple of things about Optima Bank. We started back in 2019. In 2019, Optima had exposure of 40 billion euros. Last month, we provided a 120 million euro loan to the Attiki Odos company. Here you see the course of our deposits, the course of our loans. Let me stick to the first 9 months of 2024 because as of October 4th, 2023, we are a listed bank, so we cannot go in public with stuff before officially declaring them or reporting them in our statements. Our trajectory has been amazing. 40 million euros of profit, of net profit following after taxes, 100 million euros in 2023, and for the first 9 months of 2024 we have an income, profits that have exceeded the 2023 figures, and we are really proud of that because we were the first company getting listed and being the trailblazer, if you like. We paved the way for others. Then Intralot followed. It was a listed company that increased its share. Trade Estate, Orilina, the Athens International Airport, Noval. Then the Bank of Cyprus got listed in the Greek Stock Exchange. In the Athens Stock Exchange, apologies. We have had Attica Bank and Synergies proceeding with share capital increases. The same happened with Actor, and very recently, a great increase of share capital by the Alter Ego, the IPO of Alter Ego. They're operating in a very challenging industry. So, the Athens Stock Exchange also reflects the exceptional trajectory of the Greek economy. And allow me to say that the stock exchange has become, again, a tool, a financial tool, a way to get cheap money for a company to grow. I would like to rest my case by quoting a famous Greek, a Greek who actually, in February, every February, we have a meeting in Optima Bank every February where we have a meeting with all executives, all the people of Optima. So last Saturday, we met at the Athens concert hall, the Megaron Musikis as we call it, and there's always some speaker, a third person. And we invited an amazing Greek whose name, he's a legend now in NASA, Voyager 1, Voyager 2. I'm talking about the former president of the Academy of Athens, Stamatis Krimitzis. He gave us an astonishing lecture, and his end quote was the following. Our generation, because he's a bit older, and he realized that, and then he changed his word and said, your generation will have to face two major challenges. AI, artificial intelligence that is, and climate change. And you will have to face them simultaneously. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you both very much. It's possible, sometimes one problem is a solution to another. So it's possible that AI will help with climate change. But the immediate challenge that Greece faces, and thank you very much for that X-ray of the financial health of Greece as a country and also Optima as a company. You can be doing everything right in this country, but you are connected to other economies and you have to exist in the world economy, which is very uncertain. So I wanted to ask each of you, in our first discussion earlier today, there was a bit of a disagreement about whether there were going to be tariffs coming from America and whether this was going to cause problems. So what is your perspective on the risk that the world economy poses to the Greek economy? Minister.
Some years ago, the basic anxieties we had regarding our economy had to do with our own policies, populism here and all these things. You are right. Right now, our anxieties have to do most with the external environment, with the Washington, D.C., Brussels relations, with the tariffs policy and all these things. You see, we have to respect the will of the American people. They decided to elect President Trump, fine. That was their right. What we have to do, I speak now as the Greek Minister of Finance and member of the ECOFIN and Eurogroup, is to respect these decisions and try to cooperate with the Americans. Of course, as you know, it takes two to tango. It doesn't depend only on us. It depends on the other side of the Atlantic. I hope that the other side of the Atlantic will understand that it will be mutually beneficial to continue having some differences from time to time, but common denominators as well. And I believe, given the personality of the Minister of Finance of the US, that will be the case at the end of the day. However, we have to work with the worst scenario. So what I believe is that the election of President Trump must operate as a wake-up call for Europe to unite and act now. The sooner we decide to act together in a decisive manner, the better for all of us.
In which respect? Economically, in defense? Is there a
in all these respects. First of all, as you know, there are two different reports with very interesting proposals and solutions. the Draghi report on competitiveness and the Letta report on the single market. The solutions, the proposals at least are there. Instead of always discussing and repeating the discussions on the same issues and so on, we have to understand that the delay will not operate in favor of Europe. We have to act on the level of competitiveness, first of all, and of course the level of single market, where exactly CMU, Capital Markets Union, completing the banking union, the so-called third pillar, constructing European energy networks, grids, because that will enhance our competitiveness as well. And of course, we must not ignore the common defense pillar. This is a necessity, taking especially into account Russia's aggression in Ukraine.
Okay, Georgios Tanaskidis, what do you think about this? Are you worried about this for your customers and for your own company?
First of all, as a person, I'm optimistic. I'm not so sure that tariffs will be imposed to the extent that some people believe. I believe that President Trump is very transactional. So
what do you think his price is for not imposing tariffs? Is it higher defense spending? Is he going to say, if you go to 3.5%, and by the way, that's what Greece is spending, so
we
job done.
More than 3%, so we abide by these rules.
But do you think that's the kind of deal we're looking at here, which is, look, Europe, if you don't want the tariffs, spend more on defense?
No, actually, I think of something else. I'm not so sure that it will happen, but this is what I would like to happen.
Go on.
If he imposes tariffs, Europe should impose tariffs as well. And then we'll see. Because now the American economy is very much dependent as well on the European economy. And second of all, I believe that maybe this would be an incentive for the European Union, instead of breaking apart, to move towards the United States of Europe. It is about time.
Okay. There is also, of course, a secret weapon that Europe has that it hasn't used yet. And this could be useful not just with the tariffs, but also with Donald Trump's desire to take over Greenland from Denmark, which is that Denmark controls the world supply of Ozempic. So I think that should be the price, right? If you want to keep getting the Ozempic for the Hollywood stars, then you need to not put tariffs on us. The earlier discussion, there was a very interesting agreement that defense spending was not just a necessity, like you said, but could really be a useful lever to improve competitiveness in Europe and to revive growth and so forth. What do you think about that idea? It would rely on centralized, harmonized procurement, which might be quite difficult, but what do you think about that?
I've been a member of the European Parliament for 13 years, and I always remember the discussions concerning this issue even then.
Right.
But of course, we Greeks were in a minority position, underlining the need for Europe to invest in defense. Once again, strangely enough, in a very bizarre way, I believe that Russia's aggression may act as a catalyst for Europe to accelerate its pace on this issue.
But do you think it would have broader economic benefits just beyond the defense one?
For the European defense industry, no doubt about that. But of course, I mean, first of all, political will is needed. Now there are many countries discussing this idea. The Baltic countries, Poland, Italy, and I understand to some extent even Germany, and of course France. So probably there is the critical mass now to pass from theory into action.
But everybody wants you to buy their weapon system, right? France will say, yes, we should just all buy the same...
I will not elaborate.
The same...
That.
Okay, I take your point.
I mean, I refer to the need for Europe to have a common defense policy. What you mentioned is another thing.
Okay, that's a different problem. Excellent.
Where there are clear, rules and regulations.
Well, this goes back. You said you would like a move towards the United States of Europe, and this again was something that came out of the first discussion. That in order to do a lot of these things, you actually do have to centralise more decision making in Brussels, and isn't that going to be quite difficult politically right now?
It is definitely very difficult politically. I believe that from a certain point onwards, we saw that every prime minister in Europe is very happy to be the leader of his own country and not to move to a European vision. However, I believe that if we have a certain threat, and if nobody will move to help us out, then maybe we may think again of our entire union.
Okay, so you're optimistic.
In this turbulent time, we don't need less Europe.
Right.
We don't need more Europe either. We need more efficient Europe.
Right.
Not a Europe which over-regulates, but a Europe which focuses on the real needs of this particular period. Competitiveness, energy, common defense.
There seems to be a lot of talk about a sort of realization, waking up and realizing that maybe Europe has over-regulated in a lot of areas. Where do you think there is the most scope for a more efficient Europe? In which area do you think this could be demonstrated first?
First of all, dealing with over-regulation would be a significant step forward. This is something I heard many times in Brussels with no tangible results up to now. So I hope that the new von der Leyen Commission will deal with this issue in an effective manner. I already referred to the most important deficits of the European Union. I said
the banking union and the common
competitiveness, and talking about competitiveness, capital markets union and banking union, common energy policy, emphasis on constructing new, especially electricity grids, and common defense.
But all these common things
probably common procurement, public procurement rules.
Can you have common things without more rules? This all sounds like a recipe for more rules, not fewer rules.
What I described.
Yes, all of these, if you harmonise all these things, don't you have to have new rules about what the harmonised standards are?
You know, there are rules concerning even the way the lifts operate up and down. So we have to abolish all these kind of rules and focus on the real needs of the European citizens. This is what I believe.
Okay, you heard it here first. We're going to abolish lifts.
It is a bit of exaggeration to regulate the way the lifts are working and not to have some concrete policy on energy.
Right. Okay. It's the wrong priority. Finally, I wanted to ask you, because a lot of European countries are in the position now where they have a deficit. They are trying to balance their books. At the same time, they're being asked to spend more on defence by Donald Trump, but also by other Europeans. And they need to somehow boost the performance of their economy. These are all problems that Greece seems to have solved. So you are leading the pack in European growth. You are spending more than everybody else on defence and so forth. I know you would not want to give other European countries advice, but if I was writing an article in The Economist giving them advice, what should be in that article?
Look, I'm not going to teach any colleague of mine in the Eurogroup and the ECOFIN lessons, especially taking into account what happened in this country in the previous decade. We have to learn the lessons concerning Greece, and this is what we are trying to do, combine always fiscal prudence with a business-friendly approach. This is the recipe of our success, but with no illusions. We know that we have to continue this effort because the basic objective of this is the real convergence. And we have not to water down our policies, to avoid any populist temptation, and to continue in a professional manner to deliver results. This is the Greek recipe. As regards the others, it's up to them to decide what to do.
Okay, well, thank you very much. A very diplomatic answer. Thank you very much, Minister Hatzitakis and Mr. Tanaskidis as well. Thank you both.
Thank you. It was our pleasure.
So,
Why do we work? Why do we make the sacrifices we make? The late nights, the sinking with coworkers 5 time zones away.
Why? Why?
Why?
¿Por qué hacemos lo que hacemos?
Why? Because we all want our work to mean something. We want it to have impact. And not just on the bottom line, but the people we ultimately serve. Your customers. Iron Mountain knows how to make your work mean more. After all, we've been protecting your most valuable assets for over 7 decades. Who better to help you use it to unlock new ideas and insights that will not only accelerate your business, but elevate it in so many ways. By digitizing your information, securely decommissioning your IT assets, safeguarding your brand reputation, collaborating to meet your sustainability goals, and connecting your work to the world.
So let's roll up our sleeves and get to it, shall we?
Let's find the gold in your mountain of data.
Let's elevate.
Let's elevate.
Let's elevate.
大家都是你们。
让我们提升。
Let's elevate.
Let's elevate.
Elevate the power of your work.
4,6 δισεκατομμύρια χρόνια πριν, ο ήλιος μας έχει διανύσει πολύ δρόμο για να φτάσει στο σήμερα. Μας χάρισε φως και θερμότητα. Μας έδωσε τη δύναμη της φύσης. Δημιούργησε τη ζωή, ένα τεράστιο επίτευγμα πέραν της ανθρώπινης φαντασίας. Κι όμως, κάποιοι εξακολουθούν να υποτιμούν τη δύναμη του, αλλά όχι εμείς. 4,6 δισεκατομμύρια χρόνια. Τόσων ετών είναι η πιο προηγμένη τεχνολογία εχμής. Στη United Group αναπτύσσουμε τα δικά μας αιωλικά και ηλιακά πάρκα για να εξασφαλίσουμε 100% ανανεώσιμες πηγές ηλεκτρικής ενέργειας από το 2027. Η φύση έχει επενδύσει σε εμάς εδώ και αιώνες. Τώρα είναι η στιγμή να επενδύσουμε και εμείς αυτοί. United Group. Με τη δύναμη της φύσης.
Check this out.
It hasn't been such a long time since people first started shopping online, and it was easy to keep up with the clicks. Little by little by little by more, the clicks added up to be more than the stores, and e-tailers worked harder than ever before because they had to keep up with the clicks. The clicks came from laptops, then tablets and phones, Monday through Sunday, office and home, 24 hours in every zone, and still they kept up with the clicks. Now shoppers ask more from the websites they're on, their language, their currency, their way, or they're gone, so you'd better keep up with the clicks. All of a sudden, there are so many must-dos if you want to keep selling, like delivery there, no there, or there.
And make it tomorrow. First thing.
No time for borders. Got to stay in control, to stay in the flow and continue to grow. But we'll help you. Keep up with the clicks.